Most of us know the story of Joseph of Egypt, who was given a marvelous coat by his father, sold into slavery by his brothers, and is the star of a Broadway musical. Living Scriptures has a fabulous video to help refresh your memory on this great man. Joseph's amazing life is one huge master symbol of Christ in many ways. So let's look at how Joseph points to the Savior. Now, just as the Savior is our good shepherd, Joseph too is a shepherd. He and Jesus were both hated by their brethren. But why was Joseph hated? Well, because he's Jacob's favorite son, and his fancy coat really annoys his brothers. But what really makes them mad are the things he often tells them about the dreams he's often had. One day, Jacob, now known as Israel, sends Joseph to the field to help his jealous brothers. Unfortunately, it's like sending a lamb to the slaughter. They strip him of his coat, and Judah plots to sell Joseph to the Ishmaelites for the cost of a common slave. Just like Judas would one day sell Jesus. Dragged hundreds of miles away to the mighty kingdom of Egypt, Joseph is bought by Potiphar, captain of Pharaoh's guard. And Joseph slays as a slave, and though he learns to walk like an Egyptian, he's still faithful to the God of Israel. Potiphar notices that everything Joseph does pretty much turns out awesome because the Lord is with him. So Potiphar appoints Joseph as the overseer of his whole house. However, there's a big problem in Potiphar's house. Potiphar's wife. Yeah, she tempts Joseph time and again to commit sin, but he always says, No! How can I sin against God? A good question to ask ourselves in compromising situations. But she just doesn't take a hint, and one day she traps him. As Joseph quickly flees, his cloak is torn off. And because Potiphar's wife can't take rejection, she uses the cloak to frame Joseph. Potiphar casts him into prison. Interesting. Both Joseph and Jesus were falsely accused of sins they didn't commit, and were declared guilty. Unfortunately, sometimes even when we do the right thing, life can get worse. A lot worse. Have you ever felt this way? Joseph consistently chooses the right and is faithful, but the rewards don't come for many years. But these trials aren't a sign of God's disapproval. In fact, God has a plan for Joseph and is continually with him. Just like in our trials, he never abandons us. And amazingly, Joseph doesn't lose hope and always remains faithful to the Lord. Now, in prison, the Lord blesses Joseph to win the respect of the chief jailer, who then makes Joseph overseer. This allows him to have keys to the prison, which means he can escape. But Joseph is a convict with conviction, so he does the honest thing and stays. Likewise, Jesus could have escaped his pain and suffering at any time by calling down a legion of angels, but he chose to stay and complete his mission because of his love for us. In prison, Joseph meets two unlikely prisoners, the Pharaoh's head butler and chief baker, who ask Joseph to interpret their dreams. With the power of God, Joseph predicts that in 3 days the baker will be hanged, while the butler will be saved. These dreams also point to Jesus, who, like the baker, was killed, but after 3 days was redeemed like the butler. Now fast forward 2 years. One night, Pharaoh wakes up in a sweat after some crazy nightmares. He wants to know what the dreams mean, but none of his counselors have a clue. Suddenly, the butler remembers Joseph. So after descending below all in prison, Joseph is finally freed because of his God-given power to interpret dreams. Eventually, the power of God will free all of us from spirit prison. It turns out, Pharaoh's dreams predict 7 years filled with bounteous harvest, followed by 7 years of famine. With these interpretations, Joseph urges Pharaoh to make specific preparations to save the Egyptians from the impending doom. Pharaoh is so impressed with Joseph's wise counsel that he appoints Joseph as overseer of Project Save Egypt. Fun fact, Joseph, like Jesus, was 30 years old when he began this saving ministry. After stockpiling tons of food for 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine strike Egypt as well as that whole part of the world, the people looked to Joseph to save them from starvation. This reminds us of our Savior Jesus Christ, the bread of life. But can Joseph, a man who spent most of his life as a slave or in prison, handle a huge job like feeding an entire country for 7 years? Is Joseph in over his head? And what about Joseph's brothers? Do they ever get what's coming to them? Next episode, find out what happens when the now powerful Joseph comes face to face with the brothers who sold him into slavery.